In this episode, I'm joined by Devon Campbell, a web developer who has created a resource for those transitioning from one stage of life, whether that be school or a specific job field, into being a web developer. And even more specifically, a lot of the resources are focused on allowing these new web developers to freelance. So he is also a web developer freelancer himself who transitioned from one area of technology into web development as a freelancer. And so he very kindly created this resource and offers free mentoring sessions with those who want to change the direction of their lives towards freelancing within web development. A really good episode, and I hope you learn something and enjoy. Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Dave Albert. In this show, I talk about technology, building a company as a CTO and co-founder, and have guests to discuss their roles in technology and entrepreneurship. Today, we're joined by Devon Campbell from Seattle, Washington. He is a freelancer with Radworks Web Consulting. He has also created Raddevon, a resource for people who are beginning a transition into a new field, specifically web development, and helping them to become freelancers through his experiences. Thanks so much for joining us, Devon.
Thank you, Dave, for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Can you tell us, a bit about yourself and your background and how you got into this?
Yeah, sure thing. There was a time in my life not too many years ago when I was working for a public school system and I was doing IT work. And every morning I would wake up to the alarm and I would roll over in bed and start thinking, is there any legitimate reason I cannot go to work today? And that was sort of the point where I realized that this was not healthy and I wasn't really living the life that I wanted to live. And so I decided to try to find something different. And I had always been interested in web development. And actually, I went to school for computer science. So I have an associate's degree in computer science, but I never really did anything with it. So I decided that I was going to start putting that to work for me. It actually evolved a little bit more than that. I was doing an email newsletter for teachers in the school system to help them understand how to use their technology. And that was a part of my job that I really enjoyed. So I decided I was going to take that to a broader audience and launch that and allow teachers anywhere to subscribe to it for a fee. So I tried that for a little while. That absolutely bombed. I think I made probably $20 to write just ridiculous amounts of content. But what I did in doing that is I got my web development skills sort of back up to speed and built the website for that project. And when that bombed, I sort of decided, well, I've put some work into getting these skills back to where they need to be. Why not just take those and keep using them for people who find value in them? Okay, cool. So what was the your first step there after, upskilling yourself through the newsletter? How did you transition into full-time freelancing? I started by taking an online boot camp because I had messed around with a lot of JavaScript, but I had a lot of gaps there specifically. So I did an online boot camp, a company called Thinkful. It was a pretty good program. They paired me with a mentor and I filled in a lot of those gaps in JavaScript. So at that point, I felt like I was ready to do work. I started applying for jobs and I wasn't really getting any traction applying for jobs. I knew that there were freelance marketplaces. So I thought, well, while I am working on getting this full-time job, which is what I thought I wanted, I'll just explore some of these freelance marketplaces and see if I can get some smaller gigs while I'm waiting for the big, the real gig to come through. And then that sort of evolved into the thing. And I started I picked up my first freelance job from the For Hire subreddit. And that was a pretty decent gig that lasted a little while. And that's literally the only gig I have ever gotten online. Everything else has been in person. So then I started going places and meeting people and finding good clients that way. And it's funny, after I had been doing this for maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, one of the jobs I had applied for came back to me and made me an offer. And it was a decent offer. It was better than what I was making at the school system previously. But I had so much momentum and I loved the freedom of being able to do my own thing so much that I decided to turn it down and keep doing the freelance work.
Gotcha. And so how long had you been doing the freelance before you started to realize that you could help others with this and created Raddevon?
That was probably 3 years in, or maybe a little bit more. I started sort of examining what I could contribute back. And this transition completely changed my life. So I went from making $30,000 a year working for the public school system, living paycheck to paycheck, and waking up miserable every morning to go to work. I went from that to being able to choose where I wanted to live and being able to work on my own terms and just living a much more comfortable life. And there wasn't anything extraordinary about me that allowed me to do this as far as I could tell. And so I just wanted to make that a possibility for other people too, or just to let them know that is a possibility for them.
Okay. And what were your first steps with that?
I started blogging, posting articles, things I had picked up, and I sort of identified what I perceived as a gap in the information that's available. There's tons of information online about how to learn to write code, how to learn to write JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and really any other technology or stack that you might want to work with. There's lots of great information about that, but there's very little about how to take a good foundation of knowledge that allows you to actually build stuff and turn that into a career. And one thing I've noticed in the time since I started this is that even people who go through in-person boot camps that have, placement programs and all that, they're coming out into a job market where almost every posting wants you to have 3 to 5 years experience, and they just don't have that. And they can build something, but it doesn't matter because the bar is set so high because there are so many people who want this kind of work. And I wanted to find a way to bridge those people from where they were. They know how to build a project. They can provide some value for someone, but they look really risky because they don't have any actual professional experience. I wanted to bridge the gap for them to get them over to the point where they could start taking those jobs that required 3 to 5 years of experience. And since for me, that took the form of starting my own business doing freelancing, I wanted to show them how they could do that too.
Okay. What was like the first person that you helped, or was it mostly online resources like what you were doing with the newsletter, but transition to the different space and maybe different tactical elements?
I was working with a guy. We were doing a regular video series where we got together and worked on his project. So he had a project that he was trying to get across to the finish line. And I met with him and we sort of did this live on the internet over video, and we just worked through the project together. And at one point while we were doing this, he told me that he didn't really have the time to work on this anymore because he had gotten a full-time job. So that was really the first time that I felt like I had gotten somebody to the finish line. And it certainly wasn't me alone. He had drawn from a lot of different resources to get to where he was. But I did feel like that I was some small part of that and helping him get to the point where he no longer had time for me, which is exactly what I wanted.
Yeah, that's kind of funny. I don't have time for you. Excellent. We win.
Yeah, exactly. That is the goal.
I guess it's kind of like potentially how a psychologist might feel or doctors even.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you can get people to the point where they no longer need you, then you've done your job properly.
So what does it actually look like now? So obviously you don't one-to-one live stream coding exercises with people all over the world now.
Right.
So how does Raddevon work as a resource currently?
Sure. Right now, I post a new article on my blog every week, and I cross-post that to Dev2 just so more people can see it. I am working on a book to teach people how to price freelance services. That was an area that I identified that a lot of people struggle when they're getting started. So I'm trying to help with that. And I also organize a meetup here in Seattle. It's the Free Code Camp Seattle meetup, although we're not in any way affiliated with Free Code Camp. But yeah, I inherited the meetup group, and so I organize an event for them every month. For instance, this month on the 22nd, we have a career coach and a resume writer coming in to help review resumes with people. I always try to encourage people to look at freelancing as an option, but one thing I've found is that a lot of people are extremely resistant to taking that path. They lack the confidence. They feel like they can't do it, or it's just not the picture of what they wanted out of this transition. Mm-hmm. So I find a lot of times it's hard to get people around to that. So I try to meet people where they are. So I know a lot of people in my group are looking for full-time jobs. So I want to make sure I give them any tools I can to help them with that. And then in the future, I'm looking at a lot of different ways I might be able to help. I've thought about like a finishing school for bootcamp grads where they can come out and sort of be part of an agency and do some freelance work until they get on their feet, and some other things too, courses and that sort of thing. But yeah, for now, it's articles on my blog and the in-person meetup. And people also schedule mentoring sessions with me. I also offer mentoring.
Cool. How often do people take you up on that?
I've probably done mentoring for, I would guess, around 50 or 60 different people at this point.
Wow.
Yeah. So, yeah.
What are there typical things that most people have that they bring to that first session that you could give that advice now? Sure.
Yeah. Most people have a vague idea that they want to make the transition, but they don't know how. And so, of course, I try to advise them to start with freelancing because there is a big barrier to climb to get into a full-time role. So what I advise them to do is think about what kind of client you would want to do work for, and to think about that in as narrow a way as possible. So everybody's first response is, I want to do work for small businesses. And in general, it's hard to reach those people, and it's hard to talk to them in any way that makes sense to all of them because it's so broad. Mm. So I try to get people to narrow down who they want to talk to, find where those people go to talk about their businesses. So that might be in-person meetup groups. It might be forums or other communities online, and just use those resources to start to build relationships with them and to get an understanding of what their problems are. And then to start to build out a portfolio of even fake projects if you can't find any paying work, just fake projects that you've built for yourself that are attempts at solving those problems, so that when you go back to those people later and you want to offer your services, you have something to show them that looks like something you might build for them.
Okay. Anything else that's pretty common?
That's really like 90% of the advice I give to people.
Gotcha.
It's incredible how many people can benefit from hearing that. A lot of people are, well, here's another big one. A lot of people have taken boot camps and bought a bunch of online courses and done 100 different tutorials. And so one other thing I tell people is to break out of tutorials and figure out your own project that you have some sort of connection to and build that.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah.
Yeah. And to just try to break away from those tutorials. They're really comfortable because everything is laid out for you. All the problems are already solved, and you can just follow the steps and come out with something nice at the end. But it's not a reflection of the work you actually do as a web developer. So I want people to go find their own projects where not all the problems are solved and not all the questions are answered, because that's really the difficult part of the work we do. And you can't get that experience just by basically following recipes for how to build, web applications online.
The recipes was the exact word I was thinking of.
Yeah.
In an analogy that, you might get a job as a cook if you can follow any recipe, but you're not going to be a master chef if you can't begin to create your own.
Exactly. In the same way, you might eventually get a job as a web developer just knowing how to follow those recipes, but the work you're going to be doing is a lot less interesting because people are basically just going to be bringing you, hey, I need you to, they're going to be bringing you a recipe, a list of things they need you to do because you don't have the skills to do anything beyond that.
Yeah. What I was getting ready to say was back to the bit you were saying about that first bit that you talk about basically narrowing down who your first customer is, being basically what you were saying there. And that is so true with a number of businesses I tried to start and did them improperly. As a builder, right. I built the thing first.
Yes.
Without thinking well enough about who that first person. There's it's the common meme often on Reddit. Step 1, something, step 2, something else, step 3, question, step 4, profit. And that's how so many new entrepreneurs and developers and freelancers go into it thinking, oh, well, I can start building stuff and I'll create a website and I'll get a good Twitter and this and that. And they skip over that. Who's that first person that's going to pay for it?
Exactly.
And knowing who that is and making sure that you have all the right things for them, as opposed to all the right things that you read on Hacker News or the new flashy framework for whatever.
Right. Yeah. One of the most common things I hear when people are starting out is, I'm trying to start freelancing and I've looked at a bunch of the websites of my local restaurants and they all look terrible. And so I started going around to restaurants or calling restaurants or emailing restaurants and saying, hey, your website looks terrible. I can build you a beautiful website. And I try to pull those people back off that cliff and say, actually, they don't care about that. Like having a beautiful website doesn't do anything for a restaurant. I mean, unless you can show them that it does. So talk to them first and figure out what they are actually struggling with. And then figure out what you can use your skills, how you can apply the knowledge you have towards solving that problem. And then instead of talking to them about a beautiful website or a website that's mobile responsive or whatever, talk to them about the result they're going to see, because if they're going to spend money on you, they want to know that they're going to make some money back from it.
It totally makes sense. Where are most of the people who you have the mentoring sessions with from? Are they often from Seattle or are they from around the world? Or
yeah, they're from around the world. I've had a few people from Seattle, but by no means a majority of people. I've had people all over the US. I've had people in Europe, people in Asia, really pretty much everywhere.
Cool. Is there any, for the freelance work that you do, is there any specific type of customer that you focus on? So back to what you were suggesting some of those people do.
Yeah. I was focusing on startup founders for a while, and that was reasonably successful for me. And that's really kind of how I got my start. I enjoyed hanging out in those circles anyway, because entrepreneurship is something I'm interested in. So it was fun for me, and I could sort of relate to those people as a peer in addition to as a service provider. But the most powerful thing, and I think being a peer was important to develop the relationships I needed to start getting that work, because I really think that people hire you mostly because they like you and because they think you can help them. Mm-hmm. But just having a relationship is so huge, and it breaks through so many other barriers that are really difficult to tear down otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. That's half the reason I go to so many meetups. I always learn something valuable, but also knowing other people who, and not in a usury way, is not to like use people, but just,
yes,
what can I help them with? What can they help me with?
Right.
It's not that each conversation I have with people is trying to figure out how I can use them, but it's how can we help each other? How can we make the community better? So the relationships are key to pretty much everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's a huge shift that I had to make, because, and I think a lot of people come into this with the same sort of mindset. It's like, well, I'm here because I wanted to change careers. So let's keep thinking about what I want. Well, I want somebody to hire me to do this, and I want enough people to hire me so that I can make a living. But you do have to take that step back and really focus on what they want and trying to fulfill other people's needs and make them successful before you can really start to see the success.
How would you see, or through looking through your site, I saw a bit where you said that you could help people land their first freelancing gig. How do you go about doing that?
I think it starts with their relationships. So I think it's about breaking out of your comfort zone, getting out and meeting people and talking to them. And once you start to understand their problems, you can start to talk back to them and give them advice on their problems in a way that makes sense to them and lets them know that you understand what they're dealing with. If you can pick that audience and learn to speak their language, then you're never going to have to compete on like a job board, because you're already the one. So that's sort of the approach that I practice and the approach that I suggest for other people. It's kind of a long tail, but I think it's a lot better than even like what I did in the beginning, going to Reddit or trying to go to Upwork or one of these other freelance marketplaces and trying to get a quick win there. Because especially when you're first starting out, the only way you're going to get a quick win there is by undercutting everybody else. And that's just a losing battle.
Yeah, because then it's not like, well, I can undercut on this job and then that person will pay me more in the future. It's unlikely. Right. It's why did all of a sudden the price go up when the last thing we did together? So I can absolutely see where you're coming from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you set that expectation, and sometimes you have to live in it for a while before you can finally break out. So I like to practice the way I play. I like to start where I want to be.
Yeah, it's similar to something I tell people when I'm discussing job interviews, and also often when people reach out to me with really poorly framed inquiries into jobs. So, unsolicited, very crude cover letter type emails with the CV attached.
Right.
People who are hiring, whether that be for a job or hiring freelancers, they want to find someone to hire. They don't like saying no. I mean, unless there's some sort of sadist.
Right.
The job of the person trying to gain the employment or the freelance contract is to really make it easy, or make it so easy to say yes that it's really hard for them to say no. And you've got to take the burden of that on yourself before
Yes.
submitting, not waiting until. So just like you're saying there with the long tail of it, developing that relationship, even if that is just within the single cover letter, showing the thought that you'd put into understanding the person hiring, the company, the position, and why you're a good fit. It's so frustrating to get a CV and they say, please tell me if you have a place for me. People who are hiring are already too busy to do things like that. So, I try to reach out to some of those people to say, look, if you tell people why you're the person, what it is that you can bring to me, if you make it where I don't have to think and things get better, that's really hard to say no to. Same for freelancers. So
yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I tell people that when you're selling freelance services, the people who are buying, they want to earn more money than what you're costing them on whatever you're building them. So the closer you can get them to showing them that that will happen, the more likely they're going to hire you. If you can say, hey, I've done 10 jobs that are similar to yours. Here are the results these people had. They made money 10 times what you're paying me. If you can show them that, then that's almost automatic. But if you're just coming up with some vague promise of, things will be better, you'll get more conversions, or your customers will be happier, some just sort of nebulous promise, then you're just going to have to get lucky, I guess. So yeah, I'm totally on board. The closer you can get people to what they want, the less or the more work you can take off of them, the closer you are to a sale, whether that's a freelance contract or a full-time job or whatever it is you're trying to get.
Yeah, I want to go back in time and just give myself a right kick for what I thought. I thought that it was personal when I wouldn't get a response from a hiring manager or, just ignore. And now that I'm in that position and understand how busy those people really are, I thought I was busy before, but now starting a company, it's absurd how busy people are. And as in, there is no end to the amount of things that have to be done. You can't, it's never done. Right. So you go to bed going, well, let's see how much of that I can get done tomorrow. And the pile seems to get bigger every day. It never gets smaller. So you have to say no to a lot of things.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of junior developers come to me and they'll say something like, if I could just get one of these companies to take a chance on me, then everything would work out. It would be sunshine and rainbows for everybody. And I have to talk back to them. I have to push back against them and say, that's not what they're like. That's not what they're trying to accomplish. They're not trying to, if they were trying to help you, improve your station, then that would be great. But they've got a goal they're trying to reach. And the reason they're hiring is because they need to get there faster, or because they don't have a skill they need to get there, or, something along those lines. So you have to fill one of those needs. And if you don't, then you're just not going to make it. But the onus is on you to hit that mark.
Yep, absolutely. It's like, I can't remember where I heard it, but someone was talking about how they looked like a fool because they did something wrong. And they were so worried about what people thought of them. Yeah. And the question was posed, who have you thought about for the last few days? Myself, I guess. That's what everybody's doing. Nobody has the capacity to think about anything except for themselves for most of the time. I mean, family, kids, friends, but the amount of time people spend thinking about something silly somebody else did is very small. So, so it's the same sort of vein of, people don't have time to worry about you. They're really trying to survive living their own lives. So if you can make that easier, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. And we can lament that fact all day, but that is the world we're in. So
absolutely.
Might as well figure out a way to cope with it.
Use it more than that. Use it to your advantage. That's why I've stayed on this topic so long, is because you're right. It's absolutely probably the most important thing to understand.
Yeah. Well, if you do understand it, you're you're ahead of 95% of everyone out there. So you may not have 3 to 5 years of experience to get the job you want, but at least you have that piece. At least you know that, oh, actually what I'm trying to accomplish here is I need to satisfy whatever requirement they have so that I can get what I want. If you can understand that, then you're just way ahead of the game.
Absolutely. Another thing I saw on your site about disqualifying clients.
Mm-hmm.
What sort of tips do you have on disqualifying candidates? Clients, sorry.
Sure. Disqualifying clients. I think you want to be able to have some reasonable demands of your client, like that they will pay you something up front. I think that's probably the most common one that people get pushback on. And if you get pushback on that, I think that's probably a client to disqualify. I have the prejudice that if somebody doesn't want to pay me anything up front, it may be because they don't want to pay me anything ever.
Mm.
So I tend not to work with those people. But then, aside from that, I think there are lots of reasons that you could disqualify a client, but I think they're very individualized to you.
Gotcha.
So maybe they want you to come into the office twice a week, and that doesn't work for you, but that's an absolute strict requirement for this job. Then, you shouldn't take that job. Or maybe they want you to do twice as much work for the same money and they're not willing to give anything in return. That's probably not going to be a good relationship to enter into. So I think it's about taking off the rose-colored glasses and getting out of desperation mode where your only impulse is, oh crap, I have to get this work in no matter what, because that's like a really bad position to be in. It's a really bad position to be bargaining from. So you want to get yourself out of that position and just make sure you're taking care of the things you need, and while being reasonable.
Okay, yeah, gotcha. Where do you see Raddevon going in the future? Or, your freelancing career, or, just in general, all of it together, where do you see yourself headed?
Yeah, I want to be able to take people who have the skills to build for the web, and I want to be able to create independence for those people. So I want them to be able to know that they can flip a switch and not have a job, but create a job out of nothing, just because they've invested the time and effort to foster the skill set. And I think that's feasible, but everyone comes to that in different ways. So I'm trying to understand now how I can take people from different backgrounds and with different ideas of what they want out of this career path and get them all to that place of independence and freedom where they can sort of live the life that they choose.
Nice. Very nice. So what do you think the biggest problems that you're facing that you're trying to overcome right now are?
Yeah. I mean, my biggest problems are just around how best I can help, and also understanding whether the things I'm doing are effective, because I don't know. I'm sure you've experienced this a lot, just creating things and putting them out on the internet. It's hard to know how things are landing. People will reach out to you if something is spectacular, and people will reach out to you if they vehemently disagree with what you're saying, but you don't really get anything in between. And a lot of times you don't get a lot of feedback that is useful to help you change direction going forward. That's really my biggest struggle, is trying to understand what am I doing that's effective? How can I correct the things that are not being effective, and what should I stop doing?
I would love to get more feedback on the podcast, on everything. The product that we're building, I'd love to get even more feedback on it than we're already getting. So if you're out there and you're listening, you should give people feedback. I guess I should also give more feedback myself.
It takes time to do, so it's difficult to do. I always feel so privileged when someone takes the time to give me some really detailed feedback about something. I think a lot of people sometimes hold back feedback because they're afraid it's going to hurt people's feelings. And there are probably some people that it would. Mm-hmm. But for me, and I'm sure for you, Dave, when we get feedback, it's just like this fantastic gift. It's like, oh, this is incredible. Now I can go make this thing better. Now I can do a better job at what I'm trying to do.
Absolutely. There is no worse critic than that stupid voice in my head. This isn't good enough. What are you doing? Yeah. No, nobody cares about that. Just shut up. Yeah. And logically, I know that's not true. You're just a little terrorist in my head that won't leave me alone.
Right.
But getting some feedback, even if it is negative, means at least somebody's paying attention enough to care. So
yeah. It means somebody cares enough to if they can give you some direction, even if in general the feedback is negative. To me, I take that to mean, okay, this was close enough that they feel like they can get it there, right? That they feel like that by sending me this advice, that we might be able to get it there together. And that's just, for me, wonderfully validating, and also sort of helps me figure out what I need to do next, which a lot of times figuring that out is not super easy.
Right on. What do you do to keep investing in yourself?
I try to experiment with a lot of different things. That's pretty vague, I guess. To give you an example, I decided it would be cool to make sort of a schoolhouse rock for coders. So I experimented a little bit with that. It didn't exactly pan out. I may revisit it at some point, but I just try to think about what I would want if I were in this position. I try to talk to people who I know that are in this position and find out what they want. And then I try not just to take their answers, because I think I'm going to paraphrase a quote, so it's going to be terrible, but I think, no, actually it was Henry Ford, right? Who said, if you ask people what they had wanted, I don't know. I'm not going to be able to come up with this.
If I'd asked people what they'd wanted, they'd have said a faster horse. They didn't ever.
There you go. That's the one. Yeah. So I like to listen to what people want or what people think they need, and then try to stretch that a little bit further, or try to think about other ways that I can tweak it to maybe make it even better.
Yeah. That's exactly what that statement was actually about. So a lot of people think that means don't ask people what they want, when in fact it means listen to them say they want a faster horse and figure out what that means. That means, they want to get from one place to another faster. They don't really care if it's a faster horse. They just want a faster mode of transportation. So that's exactly what you've come up with there. And that's fantastic.
Right. And that's a tool I try to teach to people who are starting out in freelancing too, because people will come to you and they'll say, I want you to build this. And if you can work backwards from that and understand why they want to build that, you may be able to use your expertise to get them to a better solution. And then you've just moved way up market. You're not the person that just builds the thing that somebody tells you to build anymore. You're a consultant now. You're helping people make massive changes in their business. So you've made yourself a lot more valuable.
And a simple way to do that is with the 5 whys. Which, for anybody who's never heard of that, it's just asking why 5 times. And 5 isn't a hard rule. It's just, that's catchy and people remember it. But it's not taking that first answer of, what do you want? A website. Okay. What do you need out of it? Why do you want this website? Well, we want a place for people to come. Okay. And what do you want from them? Why do you want them to come to your website? To, browse our catalog. Okay. Why do you want that? Well, because we want them to buy it. Why do you want that? To be a profitable business. And so you've gotten down deeper to the root, or closer to the root of what it is you're actually there to do.
Yes. Yeah, that is such a powerful tool. And one of the first things I send people through when they come and sign up on my site is I have this course, I call it the Big Goals course. And for me, it was really important as I was making my transition to understand what I wanted to achieve, to have like a goal that almost made my mouth water. Like it was so close and so visceral that I could just almost taste it. And if I could keep that in my head, that gives me so much power to break through all of the difficulties that you're going to come up against trying to hit any kind of goal like that. I tell people it will replenish their willpower reserves. So, you're coding or you're sending out resumes and nothing's working out. Well, it's not going to take too long before you've got no willpower to do that and you're back on the couch watching Netflix.
Yep.
But if you have this thing, this carrot on the end of the stick that's right there and you can almost reach it, and that just pushing through for a little bit longer will get you there, I think that's an incredible tool. And I use the 5 whys to get you to that, because everybody says, when you ask them why they want to transition careers, everybody says, because I want to make more money. But why do you want to make more money? What's that going to do for you? What change is that going to create in your life? And that's the thing that's visceral, because most people aren't sitting out there, staring at pictures of piles of money with their mouth watering, right? But when they're
That's a great visual.
Yeah. I don't know many people who would have that sort of reaction. But if you start talking to people about, oh, well, I want to live anywhere in the world, or I've got, there's someone in my immediate family who needs extra care and I want to be able to be there for them. If you start talking about those things are really powerful, and those are the things that can push you across the finish line.
That's really good. What's your big goal?
Well, actually, so my big goal was to live in Seattle. And that I think was a massive part of what allowed me to make this transition. Right now, my big goal is to have more independence. So now I have more independence than I had, but I would still like to have more, because there is, even when you're freelancing, or especially when you're working a full-time job, there is certainly a level of dependence in either of those cases. Sure. And I'd like to try to minimize that. What about you? Do you have a big goal if you're thinking about it? Not to put you on the spot.
No, it's a cross between freedom and security, so that I can provide for my family without, I've been in that similar situation to you when you were with the public school, of waking up, doing tech support, and just thinking, another day of resetting passwords. I don't think I can do this anymore.
Absolutely.
To be honest, I know you yourself don't consume alcohol, and I don't much anymore, but at that time I was consuming all of the alcohol. So I was basically just trying to forget the entire day.
Absolutely.
And that's not really a good way to live. I mean, not just
it's not
health-wise, but what's the point? I mean, if you're just trying to turn off the switch when you get home, what are you doing? So that's it. Making sure that my family's provided for, but also I don't turn into someone who hates everything. So where do you think the web development landscape is headed, since you spend so much time in it? Are there any big moves that you think are coming that are going to be really impactful, or will it just continue to be increment of changes?
I think it will continue to be incremental. What I see is sort of the lower end continually gets eaten away by more and more sophisticated tools. So like now you have tools like Squarespace and Wix. So if somebody wants a brochure site, they can easily, and if they're on a really tight budget, they can easily go to one of those services and pay $5 or $10 a month and build it themselves, and they don't have to involve anybody else. And a lot of web developers get really worried about that sort of thing. But my perspective is that it frees us up to learn more interesting things and do more interesting work. So I am happy to refer people to those services, and I'm happy for that lower end to continue to get eaten away. I think that's perfectly natural, and I think that is a good direction for us to go. It pushes us to learn new things and to bring more value, like to do more valuable work. And I think that's great for everybody.
Yeah, I agree. I have concerns, not the right word. I wonder what the new iterations will begin to look like once VR begins to take more of a hold in general.
Yeah.
You know, like there's already a VR Firefox browser.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
that means that there are built-in access to browse VR, basically web pages, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, I wonder what that means. And does that change skills that are needed that some of us aren't necessarily interested in, if that makes sense? I mean, you know, there's always a difference between front end and back end and
Right.
all that sort of stuff. But that would be the one area that I'm interested in what's happening.
Sure.
But I think that's definitely a longer term play than what a lot of the future tech evangelists have thoughts on.
Right. Yeah. To be honest with you, I wish VR was being adopted at a quicker rate, because I got a VR headset maybe 3 years ago and tried it out, and it was so incredible. And I just thought to myself, if people could experience this, they would do anything to have access to this. You know, this is going to this could be a new great equalizer. You know, people can go places, and that sounds like hyperbole, but if you've experienced VR, you know that it gives you a sense of presence that a video game cannot even approach. You really feel like you're in a space. And I just thought, you know, this is going to change everything, but I don't feel like it has been adopted quite so quickly. I wanted to, because I was shopping for apartments from across the country. So I was like, man, if I could just do a VR tour of this apartment, I would have such an understanding of the space and, you know, what this is like. And instead I'm looking at these, I'm clicking through these little walkthroughs with these flat pictures that I can rotate around, and it's just not quite there. Yeah. But yeah, even if something like that did become pretty prevalent, I don't think there's a use case for the entire web being VR.
Sure.
So I think there's still going to be plenty of space for people who are not interested in writing VR stuff.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, especially with, I don't know, I have no valuable information on the topic. It's just an area that I think is interesting that will have an impact on us. I don't know how much, and I'm curious what will happen, but it's interesting to hear your perspective there on moving it forward faster. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you tried VR?
I haven't had the opportunity, unfortunately. I'm dying to. I've got somewhat poor eyesight. It's not terrible. I mean, I've just wear glasses, but I've heard that it's so good that, you know, people with very limited vision have a much better opportunity because their eyes are actually so close to where the image is projected or reflected. I don't even. Oh, yeah. So I've heard that
the eyesight.
So there are people with very limited eyesight that have a pretty good experience with it because the image is created much closer to their eye. So I'm just curious to see things like that where I don't have to wear my glasses.
Oh, yeah. Well, on the subject of VR versus eyesight, I'm a little bit nearsighted, and it worked perfectly fine for me without my glasses. My daughter has Stargardt's disease, so she has juvenile onset macular degeneration.
Oh my goodness.
And her vision is like 2100 roughly, and that's with her glasses, 2100. And she used VR and had a great time with it. As far as I could tell, didn't have any trouble. So that's maybe a data point in your corner there.
Well, that's really nice to hear. That, I mean, that it worked.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, is there anything else that we haven't covered that would be valuable and interesting?
I think we've covered a pretty good spectrum of topics here. I'm satisfied with the conversation.
Awesome. Me too. Yeah. It was very nice talking to you. Do you have a call to action for our listeners?
Yes. So go to raddevon.com. It's raddevon.com. And if you are interested in making a career transition, or if you're anywhere along that path, I have a lot of resources there that can help you. And right on the front page, I've got a button you can click to sign up for a mentoring session. And you can jump into a call with me, and I'll talk to you about your situation and your goals and help you try to figure out how to move forward.
Excellent. And other than that, is there anywhere on social media that's a good place to get you?
Yeah, basically, I'm pretty lazy on social media, so Twitter is just about it for me. You can follow me there at Raddevon, Raddevon. And I'm on a bunch of other social media too, but I don't really use it with any regularity. So Twitter's probably the best place.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'll put links to all that in the show notes. And
great.
This was a real pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us.
Sure. It was a pleasure for me too, Dave. And thank you again for having me.
And thank you all for listening.
Until next time, remember, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.